Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Mary Fran Johnson, CEO of Mary Fran Johnson Media, and the former editor-in-chief of CIO Magazine and Events. Since November 2017, this video, show, and audio podcast has been produced by the editors of CIO.com and the digital media division of Foundry, which is an IDG company. Our sponsor for today's episode is Extreme Networks, a leader in AI-driven cloud networking. This North Carolina-based company focuses on delivering secure connectivity between devices, applications, and users to tens of thousands of customers around the world. By driving the convergence of AI, networking, and security, Extreme is aiming to transform the way businesses connect and protect their networks, enabling them to deliver faster performance, stronger security, and a seamless user experience. Visit extremenetworks.com to learn more. And now onward to today's guest, who I'm pleased to say is Nabil Bukhari. He is the Chief Technology and Product Officer at Extreme Networks. He's been in his current role since 2020, and Nabil is shaping the vision, the strategy, and the execution of Extreme's consumer-centric businesses. He also serves as the general manager to the company's cloud subscription business, and he reports directly to the CEO. Before joining Extreme, prior to Extreme's acquisition of Brocade Networks in 2017, Nabil was the Vice President of Data Center Products there at Brocade. His career path has led him around the world for both entrepreneurial growth opportunities and tech leadership roles at industry leaders such as Cisco, Seagate, SonicWall, and Riverstone Networks. An expert on technology and portfolio strategy, he has more than 20 years of tech industry experience across multiple roles, ranging from sales and engineering to product management and cloud operations. As a futurist, a business leader, and a humanist, Nabil is passionate about the democratization of technology and determined to contribute to a world where tech will have a positive social impact. Nabil, it sounds all very noble. Thank you for joining us today. I'm glad to be talking with you.
Marifan, thank you so much for having me here, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. Appreciate that. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm afraid I have to say you've probably earned that introduction in all the work that you've been doing. Let's start out with your perspective on what you hear. You get out in the field a lot with CIOs and business customers, and you hear a lot these days from them about the pace of technology change and what kind of an impact it's having on their businesses in these last few very disruptive years. So let's start there. Tell us about your perspective on that.
Marifan, you said it. I mean, like the rate of change of everything around us is so perpetual and intense at this point in time that I think everybody gets a whiplash because of that, right? And that's really where the conversation really goes. Let's just kind of think about it. Like if let's just say an average tenure of a CIO is 5-7 years, let's just assume that. And let's just see what happened in the last 7 years, right? Like 7 years ago or 10, 15 years ago, it used to be like, okay, a new technology will come in and like 7-10 years that technology would percolate and slowly. And then, there's a generational change after 7 to 10 years. And a lot of CIOs were like, oh, I'll be retired by that time. So I guess just got to manage this one generational change in technology.
But that it wasn't quite enterprise enabled. The CIOs were there to make sure that their vendors were delivering on their promises and that eventually that the products, whatever they were, would grow with the enterprise.
Exactly. And at the same time, CIOs actually have the ability to tell their users not to use whatever they want or just go and sign up for these SaaS applications. And life was actually a lot more structured now that I think about it. But what has happened in the last 7 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, we started with digital transformation, which is all about digitizing your data and digitizing your processes and the early phase of automation, if you would. Well, that lasted about 2-3 years. And then there was this thing called cloud. And then all of a sudden, you needed not just a digital strategy, but also a cloud strategy. And then everybody was wrapping their heads around what does it mean to move our workloads to the cloud. I still remember, and this seems like ancient history, but was only like 5-6 years ago, where most of the conversation used to be is this cloud thing, is this actually safe? Should I really actually use it? And which cloud should I use? And then that went super fast. And
Yeah.
then not only did it go super fast, but it morphed like 10 times from everything is going to go to the cloud to now I'm going to have hybrid clouds because I'm going to have multiple cloud providers to now I need something local. And then now I need to connect all of them and so on and so forth. So that was the second transformation that happened. Now, the third one was the SaaS transformation. Because first was like, okay, I'm going to move my stuff to the cloud. But then SaaS transformation was like, now I have 1,800 vendors that are trying to sell me these point products. And they are super easy to use because they're all SaaS based. So the logic is that, hey, as a CIO, you don't really need to do anything other than just essentially get the licenses and the users can start using in like less than 30 minutes, right? So that was
Yes.
kind of the SaaS part, which led to a lot of, application proliferation. It led to some policy stuff. It led to governance, shadow IT. All of a sudden enterprises had thousands of applications that they were using and trying to secure that and stuff. So I would call that as the SaaS transformation. And then COVID happened, and then that pulled the rug from underneath everybody. And all of a sudden, everybody went into the survival mode that how do I keep my business up and running? So that was kind of a black swan in the middle. But that gave rise to essentially this massively distributed organizations by necessity. So we went into this massive distribution transformation. And that was just picking up pace when boom, ChatGPT came on the scene. And then we went into what we call as the Gen AI driven frenzy, if you would. One thing, Mary Fran, that was really interesting and caught all of the CIOs or technology or business leaders by surprise was that generative AI was perhaps the first technology that your user got to experience way before you could wrap your head around it.
Well, and you also found your business leaders and your board of directors were all of a sudden asking as many, hopefully intelligent questions about it as they never really, it was harder to grasp what
Yeah.
cloud was. But
Yeah.
as you say, Gen AI was something you could tap into Amazon and use it to order things. I mean, you could use it before
100%.
IT was using it.
So
Right.
Maritime, November 2020, I think it was November 30th, 2020 or 2022, one of these days, whenever ChatGPT came out, within 2 months, it was 100 million people that were using it, have downloaded it and uses it.
Yeah.
And the first time tech leaders got face to face with this thing that their users actually knew more about the tech than perhaps their teams. And that was for the first time in as long as I've been in tech. So anyways, we got into this AI kind of phase transformation. And to your point, it really started with those phone calls from your CXO or your board member saying we need an AI strategy, right? So
Yes.
then that has been going on for a little while. And now we are in this phase where there's a lot of investment in AI, but perhaps not a very clearly defined ROI around it.
Well,
And
isn't that why companies, especially CIOs and CTOs, decide, well, let's nail this down and have an AI strategy. But when you and I talked previously to get ready for this conversation today, you made the point that companies and CIOs don't really need an AI strategy. So I want you to go into a little more detail about why would that be true?
yeah, 100%. I'm like, that's one of my favorite topics to talk about. But just finishing the previous one. So if my count is right, then in the last 5-7 years, we have gone through 6 transformations.
Ah,
And that's really the rate of change and the pace that CIOs, CTOs, CPOs, and quite frankly, any CXO out there has to deal with. And the result has been pretty patchy, if you would.
cacophonic maybe.
Yeah, exactly. That's a much better word. Some of them can wrap their heads around it a little bit better than the others. Some are a little bit more comfortable with the rate of change than others. Some of them are a little bit more comfortable in being in that ambiguous phase. And quite frankly, a lot of them are not comfortable with the fact that the projects that they start will probably never finish. It reminds me of that saying that art is never finished, only abandoned. I think Da Vinci said that, which is kind of how tech is right now. Before you're done with one rollout, the other one kind of comes in and and starts again. So just setting the background, for what's happening with the change of face, and that is really the conversation that a lot of people have. Now, coming to your next point, and I know you and I spent quite a bit talking about it, and this is something that I talk about very openly externally as well, is that when you talk to CIOs out there, 8 out of 10, their journey on AI started something like this. It was either a CXO or a CEO or a board member, and they called and they said, like, hey, we need an AI strategy. And then what happened? All of a sudden, CIOs went out and they said, okay, we need to find some AI to use, right?
Right.
If you were an enterprise or a corporate CIO, you were looking for AI to use so you could go back to your board and say, like, look, we are using AI in all of these cases. I know what I'm doing. I have an AI strategy. If you were a technology company that created products, what did you do? You were like, oh my God, I need to put an AI into my existing products. What's the best way to do that? You know what? What if I add ChatGPT to my products? And then the net result was the following. If in the product space, all of a sudden now there are thousands of ChatGPT like, chatbot use cases, right? Every SaaS application out there has a chatbot on top of it. Now, if you were on the enterprise side, you ended up with 18 different or 18,000 different activities that are under the AI umbrella, and the governance of that became a nightmare. And that's in that context is when I was talking to you that reality is that we don't need an AI strategy. We need an outcome strategy. So what do I mean by that? We discuss this with our customers. I've spoken about this. I call it the ARC framework, and I'll try to describe it very succinctly here. That how should an ideal strategy look like around AI for any company? It should look like the following. Every company knows what they're doing, right? Their use cases, what they're delivering. You can define it as a use case. You can define it as things to do, jobs to do, or you can define it as experiences to develop and provision. It doesn't really matter to your internal people, your external audiences, whatever the case might be. You can categorize these use cases into 3 broad categories. Number 1 is stuff that you are doing and you're pretty good at it, but it takes a long period of time, so you want to accelerate it.
Okay.
Right? So like, for example, all the use cases around AI, when I'm writing an email or I'm writing a marketing copy or I'm writing a document, well, I know how to write it, but I would like to do it quicker and cheaper. Oh, great. There's an AI tool for that. I can do it quickly. So accelerate that. So there are use cases.
In a lot of companies I run into are using AI in their call center operations.
100%, right?
And
So same thing, like for example, there's very good AI tools that can route your call to the right person with all the background information, and you will hear KPIs like, oh, it reduces the time for mitigation or completion by 70% or whatever the case might be. So these are all acceleration use cases. Now, the second category is replacement use cases. Now, there are things that are happening in your company that you would much rather not. It's a bad experience and you want to just replace it, not do it. Taking the example of call center, you and I, and probably everybody that is listening has been on those calls where you call a support team and they say like, oh, they have a list of 18 questions. They ask you, do you have it plugged in? Is the light blinking red? Have you turned it off and on? And so on and so forth, right? And most of the time, it's a very frustrating experience. And now, we have AI tools to replace that experience where you come in and right at the get-go, it knows all the information and can actually provide you a better experience. So there's a lot of replacement use cases. And then the last one is things that you've never done before, and you want to create something new. So your use cases really fall into accelerate, replace, and create, and we call it the ARC framework. So it's the ARC of the company. So first thing that you should do as a company, our peers out there, the audience that is listening, figure out what your use cases are. You put your top 10 use cases in accelerate, replace, and create. Then you go about and saying, okay, if I apply AI to it, which ones can actually provide value? Now, this is where, Mary Fran, you and I were talking about it. Typically, CIOs go like this. There's a new technology. I'm going to sandbox it. I'm going to put it in a place where it can't screw things up. So I'm going to test drive it. I'm going to use it.
R&D kind of move, yeah. So because we're not going to put this into production. Right.
100%. Don't do that with AI. if you are going to pick a use case that you're going to apply AI to, pick a use case that people care about, a use case that is important enough. Why? Because once you have done that, and trust me, it's going to take you longer and it's going to cost more than you think it would. But once you're done with that, you're going to go back for that next round of investment. And unless you did a use case that your executives actually care about, they're not going to give you that money. So this is, by the way, one big difference in AI use cases. Start with the use cases that matter. So once you apply that filter, okay, now your top 10 use cases are down to 5 use cases. Next thing, look at the use cases for which you actually have the data. There's no point in boiling the ocean. There's no point like, oh, we need to fix our data before we can start the AI.
Yeah.
None of that. Pick a use case for which the data is readily available. Well, then maybe you are down to 2 or 3 use cases. Then just simply go pick one and start and go about and do that. And once you start doing it, you'll learn a lot. But once you're done with it, you have delivered value and you get the permission to go after the next one.
Well, Nabil, let me ask you about internally at Extreme Networks, as you've been there, as we mentioned, since 2020. So you have been, as the chief product officer and the CTO, you've been experiencing all this inside on your own, with your own technology staff, with the other business users. Have you been through the ARC that we just talked about, accelerate and redo and create? Do you have any examples of what you learned from that, how it worked?
Yeah, so Marifran, absolutely. And this is, by the way, I mean, the framework came after the fact. You know, it was like an interview like this where somebody was asking me, well, how did you guys do about doing that? And then I started describing that, and then we came up with the name ARC framework, you know, on that interview. But so yes, and on both sides, because as a technology company, there is a use of AI on our product side. That is what we are doing on behalf of our customers. And then there is the use of AI for our own internal uses, which is us as an enterprise, us as a company. And we have actually applied this framework on both sides. So just to give you an example, you know, a lot of times people would start from use cases. We got pitch use cases around marketing and around product documentation and stuff like that. And while those are all very interesting, the use case that we decided under the ARC framework to go about first was, how does our sales respond to RFPs?
Requests for proposals, right?
Exactly. Because what we realized was, well, obviously, we as a company really want us to be able to respond to these RFPs very quickly and actually with a lot of thought around it. Now, our portfolio is very, very broad. So this was a huge thing for us. So now also consider that this was a thing that is customer facing, because you are giving those RFP responses to your customer. So the first thing would have been like, no, this is too risky. Let's not. What if AI makes a blunder and, oh my God, we're going to end up with an egg on our face and stuff. But that's the first use case that we picked up as an enterprise. Now think about this way. This was a process that we wanted to accelerate because it took too long to do an RFP. This is a process that everybody in the company cares about. Right. And also this is a process for which we already had the data because it was about our own products and our own services.
Yes.
So it really satisfies the whole ARC framework, right? So
and you were doing it with your sales group, which
and we were doing it with our
sales group. That's where the revenue comes from. Those are the rainmakers.
100%.
Did you have any trouble like getting salespeople on board, or the fact that, when you came to them and said, hey, we're going to apply AI to this, was there a general gasp of horror, or did they look at you and say, what a great idea, we have some ideas for that as well?
So Marifran, you are touching an extremely important part of any AI framework, and that is, how are you going to get your users to buy in?
Good.
Because you can actually create the best use case or best technology. If your users don't believe in it and don't buy into it, then good luck. They're just not going to use it. Yeah. So how did we get around that? There was two things. One thing, again, as I said, we picked up something that they cared about.
Yes.
So getting it right was in their own interest, right? So now already you kind of got the buy-in into why this use case. Then the second part is around AI literacy. Because if you talk about a consumer grade AI or a consumer market AI like ChatGPT, you just go in and you do that. Obviously, people have a certain amount of experience. It hallucinates. There's a lot of accuracy problem and stuff. So of course, that was their first response. Oh, well, what if it hallucinates and what is it inaccurate and da 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 da, right? So that's where AI literacy come in, and you talk to them about like, well, how do you make this enterprise AI a lot more robust? What are the guardrails around it? What are the kind of RAG architectures? What's the accuracy? And then you show them a lot of data. I put all of that under AI literacy. So two things.
Okay.
Number one, pick a use case that your user base actually cares about. Second thing is educate them, bring in that AI literacy. Third thing, keep them into the loop from day one. They were part of the process of us developing it. So by the time it actually came out, they were clamoring for using it, and they'd already been using it for a while. So this is a pretty nice way of introducing new AI use cases. And I think this is a conversation that we have with a lot of our customers, and the ones that have kind of picked this up from us, they've actually done pretty well. Now, I'm not saying this is the only way to do that. I don't have that kind of hubris, but I'm sharing that this is something that has worked out really well for us as an enterprise and also as a technology provider, because we did the same thing with our products and with our end users as well. So
Yes, you could show that you were drinking your own champagne.
exactly. Or I recently heard another term which is like eat what you cook. I really like that as well.
That's so much better than the whole dog food one.
Yeah, no, I don't like the dog food thing.
Never
I love
enjoyed that
dogs,
very
don't get me
much.
wrong, but
But eating your own cooking. Well, and a lot of the CIOs that I've spoken with, and in recent months, eventually at some point, I feel like it's almost a federal regulation where we get around where we start talking about AI. And I've heard a lot about the importance of having solid governance in place and to paying special attention to the privacy and the importance of having really clean, accessible data. But you brought up something that I haven't heard much about yet, and probably more companies are tuning into it, about answering that question: where is the ROI? Where is the return on investment here? Tell me more about why you're hearing more about that in the market, and how you recommend, what advice you'd have for CIOs and CTOs to be ready with their ROI answers.
yeah. So it's such an important question, because in the end, tech by itself, you need to pay for it as well, right? So business and tech kind of has to go hand in hand. So look, again, going back to there was a lot of AI washing, and we were at the top of the hype cycle, and everybody was like, oh, we can give you 70% reduction in your cost or time and stuff like that. And the reality is that when I talk to tens of thousands of CIOs that are directly our customers, and then thousands of them in the general industry where I'm pretty active around it. And the reality is and I'm going to make a broad statement, I'm pretty sure there are some exceptions out there, but there hardly anybody who has come up and said like, I applied AI and my budget actually went down. Actually, what has happened is that as people are starting to deploy AI and AI enabled use cases, their cost is actually going up right now. Why? Because they have not been able to completely mitigate the cost that they had previously, because there's very few companies that have transitioned entire functions or workflows over to AI. And also, as they start going down this AI arc, they're realizing that there's so many other things that need to get fixed around governance, around literacy, around data fabrics and stuff like that. So the costs are actually going up, where the expectation was set to the CXOs or the CFOs and the CEOs that, oh my God, this is going to be the amazing thing because we're going to reduce our cost. Now, this is a little bit of a mismatch of expectation and reality. So that's where that ROI question is so important, because it should not be just cost mitigation. It should be a return on investment. And anybody who has built a plan around that knows that most of the times, companies come to their ITs and said like, oh, this is a new fiscal year. I want you to reduce your expense by 3%, 5%, 10%.
We're going to do more with less. Yeah.
Exactly. That's cost
common.
mitigation.
Yeah.
ROI on the other side is that a CIO coming up to their board and saying that, look, I'm going to invest like whatever, a couple $1 million in this thing, and it will generate a combination of cost optimization plus risk mitigation plus, in the best of examples, some revenue generation, and combine that, and that makes that investment worth it. So on the AI side, follow the ARC framework, and the use case that you pick up, determine its ROI, and do not go promise to your business leaders that all I'm going to do is mitigate the cost and reduce it, because that will not happen in the first phase. And that's really the big mismatch that we're seeing in the industry out there. And that conversation needs to get adjusted for CIOs to be able to continue to invest in AI.
Do you think one of the things we also talked about were all the complexities around cloud and cloud rollout, and now we've got AI infusing into cloud. Cloud is also one of those technologies that took the business side a while to understand what we were talking about, which is, I've heard it summed up, it's really other people's data centers.
Yeah.
And and of course, as usual, the tech industry promised it was going to save so much and be so easy for users, and almost all of that was a whole different complexity to the truth of what it was like dealing with cloud. And now you've got people, you have to hire specialists to manage all the different clouds. Talk about where the AI products, whether they are accelerating or improving things or creating things, where are they fitting in with cloud strategies? And is this even a good question? Is it necessary that CIOs understand how AI is slipping into cloud management?
Oh, Mary Fran, this is such a broad topic. We could sit here and talk about it for days.
I'm going to count on you to narrow it down, though.
Yeah, I'm going to try my level best. So think about when we started talking about cloud, it was really about data. Because think about whether it is privacy concerns or security concerns or regulations and all that kind of stuff, they are more applied to the data and not necessarily to the application. I'm making a generalization here, but generally speaking, it is about the data, right? Now, the thing that is common between the cloud and the AI is that data part. How do you collect data? How do you govern data? How do you secure your data? What are the regulations depending on where you're operating? And then how do you essentially adhere to those regulations and stuff? So the one good part is that if, as part of your cloud transformation, if you got a really good handle on your data, then you are a step ahead. So the AI will build upon on top of it. So that's I wanted to give the good news first. Now the difficult part around this is that in terms of cloud, we were able to compartmentalize data. So we were able to say that, okay, well, this data is identifiable or whatever regulation it is on top of it. So I'm going to make sure that this data is only available to this application. And this application might run in AWS and my local data center, if you talk about hybrid. So that was something that people were able to wrap their heads around. Now, where AI kind of blows that out of the water is the two competing requirements on AI. AI is more valuable if you actually have more data available to that AI.
Right. It has to keep learning.
So that's the fundamental nature of it. And the moment people start talking about these automations that go across domain, those are the high value use cases and stuff, but underneath they require data from various different silos. Think about some of the products that we are developing that requires not only the operational data from a customer's environment, it also requires all of the transaction data that they have done with us. Imagine when was the last time your technology production data and your financial data was mixed in an application? The answer is never. Yeah. But now with the AI, if you really want to deliver that high value use case, you need to be able to bring this data together under an AI umbrella, and that opens up a whole set of data governance issues, right? Related to governance and trust and regulations and how do you secure it and privacy concerns and all that kind of stuff. So that's a big area that has opened up because of AI. And this is something that companies will have to figure it out. And again, I will go back to that ARC framework in the sense that it is relatively easier to wrap your head around these concerns when you're starting with one use case. If, like a lot of companies, you said like, oh, let's just start using AI from every SaaS vendor that actually has an AI offering out there, it will get out of hand very, very quickly. Now, what we are seeing is that it is forcing those data governance and data usage requirements are forcing a change in the way the products are done. And we are seeing yet another transformation, which is taking us from the world of applications and products into the world of platforms. And I
Yes,
believe
I
that
was going to
that's
ask you about that because that's when we were talking about the speed of change and all these different transformations that CIOs have been dealing with the last 5 to 7 years. You'd mentioned that what's rising up now is the transformation of platforms.
yeah.
So let's pull up here and say exactly what do we mean by a platform? Is Extreme Networks a platform? Is Microsoft a platform?
Yeah.
Or are they multiple platforms within one universe?
Yeah, so great
Tell us
question,
about
Irfan. And just like in the technology world, we don't like to keep things simple. We like to confuse everybody. So we have used the word platform for the last 30 years to describe different things.
SaaS vendors all call their product a platform.
Exactly.
You
So
know,
I think it would be useful for me to kind of share some of the characteristics of this platform, and then I'll let everybody decide what is a platform and what is not. So, and what I will do is, and this is again from my experience, talking to everybody and doing our own company as well. So take it, for what it's worth to to your audience, make it your own, add your own specific things to it. But think about platforms. So the first thing is that for the last like 10 years or so, we were in that swing of the pendulum towards the best of breed, right? So think about when these iPhones or smartphones came out, what was the biggest mantra after that? There's an app for it.
Yes.
And then it was like there was an app to do 20,000 things, and each app did one thing, and then we ended up with 20,000 apps on our phone, and we used three of them. Then we went and said, like, okay, what was the problem? Well, every one of those apps had a different way. There was a learning curve. The operating model, if you're talking about enterprise side, was different. The licensing was different. The cost was different. And then you had too many apps. And then we started writing apps to reduce the number of apps. So that's really where that best of breed thing went. Now the pendulum is swinging back, and it is swinging back towards, okay, well, if I don't want to have that many apps, but I do want to have that many capabilities, then I want those capabilities in one go. Now, I'm not talking about one-stop shop monolithic God applications, because
Okay.
hell no, we don't want to go there. So this time round, because every time when the pendulum swings back, there's new technology to solve that problem. So that's where platformization really comes in. It's really a way of delivering a set of capabilities together, just very plain English. Now, the following characteristics need to be part of the platform. As you are evaluating a platform out there, and by the way, every vendor is going to say that they have platforms. We will say that as well. But when you're evaluating platforms, you have to think about the following. Number one, that it must give you a role-based real-time experience. If somebody comes up and says that, hey, here you go, here's a static GUI and a static GUI with nice dashboards and stuff, that's not a platform. It has to be real-time composable experience based on your job, whatever you, if you're a NetOps or a SecOps or you are a marketing person or whatever the case might be, and it
Because
has to be real time.
it's your persona based access to all of the data that is part of your job and that you work with. And the
100%.
platform needs to very quickly be able to figure that out. That
In
has to
real
be
time.
built in
And
real
that's
time.
where, so it's a lot more than just RBAC. It is not about like based on your role, what things you can access. It is more about based on your role, how do I serve up an experience to you in real time, which allows you to do your job. And that experience includes data, dashboards, AI, yada, 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 all of those things. This is pretty brand new. It is not, very pervasive out there, but a vendor that talks to you about platform but doesn't talk about these things probably don't know what platforms are. What they would do is that they will say there are multiple different applications and then put like some sort of a bundling around it and call it
Yes.
a platform. So platforms will simplify your licensing, will simplify your metering, will simplify the way you buy into them, but just be careful that it is intrinsically simple and it's not just a packaging conversation, right? So that's the second part that you should look into this. The third part that is absolutely critical is that the capabilities within a platform, they use common services. Now, what do I mean by that? So common services, from simple things like single sign-on, which have been around for a long period of time, to IAM capabilities behind the scenes, single alerting and messaging, as well as single integrations and single visualization and so on and so forth. Why is that important? The reason why that is important is because that drives a multi-layer integration between capabilities. And I won't go too much into, I promise you, I won't go too much into the tech part of it, but the capabilities in a platform must integrate at 3 levels. And this is, I'm just sharing with your audience what they should be evaluating against. I'm not pitching any company.
What to look for. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So the first thing that you need to look for is that the capabilities in that platform can be connected together in a single workflow, which means that you don't have to use APIs to bring them together, and you don't have to use your own automation to bring them together. They should be able to go into a single platform or a single workflow within the platform. Why? Because if you have to do all of these things, then the cost resides with you and the risk resides with you as well. So make sure that that is done by the vendor in the platform. That's first level of integration. Second level of integration, obviously the common services. Again, if the vendor doesn't do it, then you have to do it. Don't look at vendors who say like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Here are my APIs and you can connect all of these things together. Well, then the cost and the risk sits with you. Let the vendor do that for you. And these are all important because in the end, the data needs to be integrated. Remember, we talked about one of the biggest thing that AI is driving is that they're no longer data silos. And all of this data has to come together in a data pipeline, data fabric, data warehouse, data lake, whatever term you want to use. But that data strategy, if a vendor cannot describe to you their data strategy as part of their platform, they don't know what platforms are. And the last thing is look for platforms where AI is a core component of the platform and not a separate capability or a separate product. If somebody has a product and then say like, oh, we have a chatbot on the side or a Copilot, unless that Copilot is embedded into the core of the platform and applies to both the inner workings of the platform and the outer workings of the platform, it's not a core capability. Now, I know
it will be the CTOs and the engineering staff that can tell you if that's a core embed.
So that's where, so let me finish the previous one because this question requires a really thoughtful answer, right? So that's what a platform is. That's what the characteristics of the platforms are. Look, if as a CIO or a technology executive, you should be thinking about platforms. My belief is that the way we get around this proliferation of chatbots and more silos in AI is by marrying AI and platforms together. Now, this is at the early phase of it, so just something to keep an eye on. Now, coming back to your really interesting question, who is going to tell you about this?
Yeah.
The reality is that a CIO will have to be able to tell it himself or herself, and that is what is going to force the change in the role and the definition of the role and the characteristics of that role. This is a touchy subject, as you know, but I believe that the CIO role will evolve from being a procurer and an operator to a practitioner and an actual developer. Now, what do I mean by that? Think about right now, what happens right now, most of the CIOs, the ones that I talk to, the best ones in the world out there, they spend most of their times in procurement. How do I actually buy this technology, and what's the licenses, and how much cost is there, and how am I utilizing, and then, oh, by the way, regulations on top of it. I just need to make sure that I don't run afoul of the regulations in Europe and then in US and in Asia and stuff. So a lot of CIOs spend a lot of time doing that, which is really a procurer, and then their IT teams are running these applications. So that's the operator part. Where they need to evolve is a practitioner of technology, and they will eventually create internal products over these platforms for the use of their company. So they are going to progressively broaden their mandate and take over some of the things that are traditionally thought to be part of a CTO or a CPO's role. Look, if you're a tech company, you have a CTO, you have a CPO, you have a CIO, things are a little bit more well defined. But if you're a general enterprise, they typically do not have CTOs and CPOs, right? They have CIOs, but these CIOs must start including those roles of internal CPOs and CTOs within them. I believe that's the future. And that's why they need to be able to essentially look at these platforms and know whether these are core techs built the right way or not. Because if you look at the marketing from every company, slides all look great from every company out there.
Well, yes, slideware, it's a glorious thing in the tech industry. Now, one thing that comes to mind right away for me is, and I'm thinking of one of the most famous CIOs in the world, probably is Charlie Feld. He's a well-respected CIO, major big companies, Frito-Lay, and so forth. And he has referred to the evolution of the CIO role as a chief integration officer. And he doesn't mean just integrating components of a bunch of software products, but it's that integration writ large that you're seeing there. And it also indicates that we were talking about pendulum swinging, and you believe they're swinging away from best of breed and toward platforms. In terms of the CIO role, is a pendulum swinging back toward the more engineering backed, technical trained CIOs versus the MBAs and the MBAs and the leadership guys? And I know you have an MBA yourself,
Yes, I have an engineering degree. I have an MBA. I also have a fine arts degree just for the heck of it. But look, I'll make a statement which might be a little bit controversial, but I genuinely believe in it. In where we are going, every leader needs to know technology. It's not just CIO. And I think actually CIOs that do not have robust technology background, and it doesn't need to be that they have a degree in it. It could be just experiential as well, right? They might just be, they don't need to have a degree, but they need to know technology at its core level. I think that is going to be an absolute necessity for a CIOs. I would even venture to say that if you're a tech company, every one of your leaders need to be a technologist at heart.
yes.
If you don't have it, you're missing the point. I would even venture to say that no matter what your business is, whether you're making satellites or shoes or anything in the middle, technology literacy is going to become a really core component of your leadership team. And I'm talking C-suite here, even boards for that matter. So I really
especially
do
boards.
feel that the pendulum is swinging in such a way that understanding of those capabilities of the platforms of those technologies are really, really important, because in the future, a lot of companies will take these capabilities as well as these technologies and create internal productization. That's the beauty of platformization. It allows you a level of customization that the product world could never give you. It's not about just throwing you APIs and letting you go and build a complete different layer on top of it. But this is the next 5-year, 10-year trend. I'm not talking about tomorrow. But if you are a company that is thinking about your next CIO, or you are a young CIO, or it doesn't matter what age CIO you are, and you're thinking about the next 5 years in your role and stuff, these are things that you should be considering. You'll come at your own conclusion based on your own industry and in your own company, but at least these should be things that you should be considering. Yeah.
Well, and I know there's been stories. CIO Magazine and CIO.com have spent decades watching and, advocating for the CIO role, and also watching how much it has changed over time. I mean, consider this is a role that started out as the data processing manager. And knew all about the wiring closets, and could talk networking, until the cows came home, kind of thing.
Yeah, and my friend, on that, you remember there were like some other roles that kind of started developing. There was a chief digital officer role that some companies did, and then there were some companies that had this data roles and stuff. And what happened? They kind of, you don't really see chief digital officers that much anymore. At least I don't. So they kind of that's just a way to evolve the CIO role. So what happens is that when your CIOs are not cutting it, you create a different role, and then over time that capability merges back into the
Yes.
CIO role.
Yeah.
That's the kind of, it kind of narrows down and then expands again and then narrows down. I think that's the undulations of a CIO role, and I think in the next 5 years there'll probably be a major expansion in that role.
Well, and I see a number of chief information and digital
Yeah.
officers. So the and digital has been added in. And I have one show coming up, a Leadership Live interview that is coming up, and I'm interviewing a very long-time CIO who has become his very large company's chief AI officer.
Oh yeah, that's another new role that is popping up.
That's
You
going to
know,
be really interesting.
so to me, the chief AI officer role is very similar to what chief digital officer was like when digital transformation was a new thing. It's just kind of like a new thing. So you put like an exec that is 100% focused on this. My opinion, chief AI roles will merge back into the CIO role over the next 5 years. That's my opinion. Well, this is if the CIO community kind of progresses to that level, because as you were saying earlier, I think like last time when we were talking that this is a role that everybody likes to scare, right? We like to scare our CIOs all
Yeah.
the time because you're like, oh my God, this new transformation, the CIOs are going to go away. They don't know anything. But the reality is that the role just expands to take on all of these capabilities. I think chief AI role, in my view, is just another aspect of a modern CIO.
And there are several major research companies who we all know who they are, so they will remain unnamed, but they've built their fortunes and their own history around scary projections about what's happening with CIOs and always assuming that CIOs don't understand what's going on and, putting out, like magic quadrants and that kind of stuff, and all the rating and ranking that goes on. And
Yeah.
those are usually aimed right at the business executives who
Yeah.
want to feel more at home with where technology is heading.
Right.
And maybe they will now that AI has so driven its big truck into the general consensus and the mindset of ordinary people. Do you find that there is more of a respect and a realization for the complexities of technology, that AI is coming along? Are you seeing that in the customers you talk to, where there is an appetite for trying more things with technology, for understanding that the CIO or CTO role is indeed integrating all these different needs together with some sort of technology as a hopeful answer?
I would say yes. I think there's a lot more realization around how fast tech goes and how pervasive its impact is. I think the generative AI, or AI obviously has been around since the 50s, but the generative AI phase that we are sitting in, it has just made that abundantly clear that it is not a tech to be held in a certain silo. It is going to be
Okay.
pervasive. It is a technology, it is a capability, it is a product, it is an agent, co-pilot, and soon enough it'll become a coworker, which is an entire track on the AI side. And I think that realization is kind of setting in the CXOs and the C-suite as well as in the board. I think yet to be seen how they will respond to it. Now, my hope is that they will respond by there being more tech literacy and AI literacy in the C-suite and in the board, but that's our hope. We'll see. But that's yet to be determined. If you're a CIO and you report directly into the CEO, push for that. Push for that AI tech literacy for the rest of your peers in the C-suite as well as for your board. It will make your life easier, and it will hopefully fix the gap between expectation and reality. This is where we started with on the ROI side, right?
Talking about ROI, exactly.
Because people read like media, and media is like, oh, half the jobs are going to go away. And then the CFO turns around, oh, great, I'm not going to have half the cost. Just not reality, right? So helping bridge the gap between the two, that will help CIOs. And also, I think this is a great opportunity for them to be more than just a cost center by maneuvering themselves at the center of the technology strategy of every company. And the reality is, every company is a technology company, whether they know it or not. Right.
Yes.
So,
Well, and people have been saying that for a number of years now. Whether that's really sunk in and the top executives believe it, if they're a shoe company, they understand how important technology is, but you'd have a hard argument with a CEO who probably doesn't even do email all that well,
yeah.
So it's
In,
not necessarily pervasive. I want to pivot over to talk about the size and scope of your own technology team. I know you wear a couple of different hats at Extreme Networks, Chief Technology Officer, Chief Product Officer. How do you have all that structured to deliver the greatest value to the company with the technical talent that you do have?
Yeah, and my friend, that brings us to the organizational structure. I think there's going to be a lot of experimentation that happens in that space for us. Obviously, the engineering talent that I have, they're about 15, 1,600 people, but they're not all in what we typically consider as a CIO group
Enterprise
or an
IT.
IT. Enterprise IT, I would say, is in more that 100 people range, right? Which is
Okay.
a little bit more normal. But that's really where it is going. I think there's going to be, if you're a tech company, uh, which means that your products are technology focused, then the overlap and the lines between your product teams and your IT teams are going to blur massively to a point where, especially if you have cloud ops, then the difference between your cloud ops and your typical enterprise IT, they're going to start blending together.
And
That's
by cloud
just
ops, you mean cloud operations,
correct. Yes.
meaning
So think about
customer facing or,
yeah. So
yeah.
think about like, for example, at Extreme, we have so many SaaS products which run on so many different clouds. I mean, we were one of the original companies that were the poster child of hybrid cloud or cloud
Yeah,
agnostic.
I remember that.
So, and how did we do that? One of the key components of being able to do that was that we had an amazing, and we still do, have one of the most robust and forward-looking cloud operations group, which really allows us to function at all of these clouds at the same time. So that's
Okay.
really cloud ops, and all of our public-facing products, as well as a lot of our internal products, they all run on cloud. So our cloud ops team really is the one that operates them on a day-to-day basis. Now, between that team and your enterprise IT team, they will start merging together if the following two things happen. Number one would be if you are going to use AI based or AI native products in your internal enterprise IT, then perhaps the team that is most adept at data governance is your cloud ops team. So it is in your benefit to start kind of pulling them together. That's the first condition that needs to happen. The second one is you are a company where in your enterprise IT, you believe that the AI use is going to force you towards a hybrid cloud deployment, which means public cloud and local cloud, which by the way is a big thing right now, right?
Yes.
You heard, the Dell, Michael Dell talk about it. You heard Broadcom talk about it. You have talked, like, NVIDIA talk about it. So I would not take a side on that argument. The point is, if you are a company for which this localized AI is going to be important, then it is. So that's the second factor. Start kind of bringing your enterprise IT and your cloud ops team together. So that's one of the changes that I think is going to need to happen in your organizational structure out there. The second one I would say is also that the way the IT has to move is that more and more, and this is I'm seeing a trend that I'm seeing is that the companies believe that your central IT team are the ones that are going to satisfy those data governance requirements. That your data is governed properly, there's privacy and regulations and stuff, and that is not necessarily a skill that central IT was really good at. Maybe in some cases they were, but just remember our conversation from earlier. That problem is just blowing up. So I think IT or CIOs really need to start kind of, this is where they need to work closer with their legal teams.
I was just thinking that this sounds like a job for the legal office,
Exactly. But
but
think about,
yeah,
like, for us, my cloud ops team, my IT team, and my legal team, they essentially sit together and work together on this because
they
they
cohabit.
exactly right. So they're
Yeah.
what was the word that people used to use? They're tied at the hips. I don't know how
Oh yeah.
good
Yeah.
of an
I know.
analogy that
It always
is.
sounded like one of those races, like, where you put your foot in a bag and run
Yeah,
around. And, yeah.
three-legged races, right? But
Yes, yes, yes.
this is the organizational shift that CIOs must start thinking about it. Remember, I was saying that,
Good.
look, you that literacy to the rest of the C-suite is so important because more and more and more you're going to rely on functions that are sitting with some other C-suite leader. So that organizational structure is going to change. For me, and now I'll give you my view on this. Some of the ways to do it is that do not go by functional roles and processes and policy, but transition over to frameworks. Because frameworks are the one that allow you the description yet flexibility to be able to deal with these things outer in the organization rather than everything coming up, through the totem pole into the C-suite. So I'm a huge fan of frameworks,
Yes.
and I think as the platformization continues, the frameworks will become the main operating mechanism of companies out there. And CIOs could drive this if they really wanted to. That would be really good for their future.
Well, and stop and give us kind of a general description of when you say a framework. You're not an architect. We're not talking about the framework of a house, or maybe we are. A data framework, is it a data architecture? When you say framework, what do you exactly mean?
So, and it's surprisingly simple what I mean, but it is surprisingly difficult to actually implement it. So
Okay.
think about simple things like this. So I'll give you a story because I love telling stories and I'll highlight what the problem is. So most of the companies, most of the C-suites that you talk out there, where will they start from? Most of the time they start from the strategy of the company. Right? Oh, they went on an ELT offsite and then they went to this fine, nice, fancy hotel. They spent 3 days and outcomes like off of the top of
Oh
the
yeah.
mountain that came down with like
They
this
came back with a
with
strategy,
the
right?
strategy, right? Now the reality is that strategy should never be the first step off the framework. The frameworks, which is like what the company needs to do, they really should start from an outcome because a strategy for what, right? And the reality is that there's no company out there that has a single strategy. You have a different strategy for every outcome that you want to deliver, right? So that's kind of like, so that's what the framework does. Identify the outcome, select a strategy, and then the next step, and essentially I'm sharing what are the key characteristics of a good framework. By the way, I believe that companies should just go write their own frameworks. Anything that was written like more than 3 or 4 years ago, don't use it. It was meant for a different world, a different age altogether. Write your own. They're not that difficult to write. But it must define outcome. It must have a selection process for strategy. It must have a way to define an operational plan and an execution plan. If there's somebody in the audience thinking that, hey, operational plan and execution plan are the same thing, all the more reason that you should have frameworks because they are
Yeah.
not. They're two very
Okay.
separated things. Now, the other part also is that the beauty of framework is that it doesn't rely on titles. No framework is like, oh, the framework has to start from a C suite or stuff. No. Every single person in the company should have the flexibility and the air cover to define their outcome and build a framework for that.
Interesting.
And as you know, I'm a massive fan of decentralization of authority, right? Because the
Yes.
tool that somehow people sitting in C-suite actually know what they're doing, that's a question mark. Maybe sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But the company as a whole generally have a very good idea as to where it should go. And that requires people from every portion of the company and every level of the company to have the ability to define the outcomes and run a framework around it. Now, obviously, you have to have a way so that this is all kind of directed in a direction, but that should be a top-down mandate. So these are nested frameworks, topic for another probably conversation, but I believe that the organizational future of companies is more likely to lie in the direction of frameworks than anything else.
Okay, fair enough. And I know it's a fascinating topic, and you're very passionate on it. Now, as we wrap up here, tell us just as briefly as you can, what have you learned about leadership? I mean, you may not be a huge fan of centralized authority, but you have two chiefs in your title. You're a chief product officer and a chief technology officer. What have you learned about leadership, about driving the kind of mindset and the mental framework that you need your teams to have for helping the company move forward? What have you learned over the couple years you've been doing this at Extreme Networks since 2020? So you have some experience at this.
Mary friend, great question. Look, I think
Put you
I've
on the
learned,
spot, right?
yeah, I have learned a lot of ways how not to do it. So
Well,
that's the first thing, because you try new things and then you learn that, oh, this doesn't really work. But just generally speaking, these things that I talked about, the requirements for frameworks, decentralized authority. Look, I don't really believe in the cult of the leader. I actually believe, although I have two C titles, but I actually believe that the future is a lot more decentralized. I think the more we are dependent on the decisions of one or two or three or four people, the bigger the chance that the difference between good and bad will be massive. So I feel like that's one thing that I've learned as a leader is that decentralized authority and decision making, you're better off doing that. The other one on a personal level, what I would say is, look, it's a continuous loop of inspiration and information. As a leader, your role is to both inspire and inform, and at the same time, your role is to be inspired and be informed. So it is a continuous loop of inspiration and information, and the more freely this loop is running in your organization, the better off it is for everybody. And I'll leave it there. Yeah.
that's a good place. No, that's a very good summary, and it leaves it open to lots more discussion in the future, especially for the CIOs and senior IT leaders who may be listening today. So thank you for that. Well done.
Well, it's easy to answer when the questions are really nicely put and they're very directed. Yeah.
Thank you. I do worry that my questions get a little lengthy and rambling. So you've been very good about answering them. In fact, doing them real justice. So thank you for that too. And thank you for joining me today. This has been a really enjoyable conversation.
Mary Fran, thank you for inviting me. This is fantastic. It's always good to be able to think about these things because most of the times we are just running from one issue to another to another, and it's
Yes.
good to just step back and actually think about this as more of a philosophical thing,
Yes.
rather than just a to-do list on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for
Totally
that.
agree. Totally agree. Well, great. Well, thank you so much. I hope that if you're watching and listening to us right now, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with the Chief Technology and Product Officer at Extreme Networks, Nabil Bukhari. This episode is the latest addition to our extensive and I hope permanent on the web library of CIO Leadership Live podcasts, which includes more than 150 in-depth interviews with prominent CIOs, all of them available on CIO.com and on CIO's YouTube channel, as well as all the popular podcast platforms. Please do take a moment to subscribe to CIO's YouTube channel, where in addition to the many dozens of conversations with US-based CIOs, you can also find the international editions, which have been proliferating, of the podcast featuring senior IT leaders from Canada, India, New Zealand, and Australia. Thanks so much for joining us and being here today, and we will see you next time.